So we're here today with some great teachers, some talented teachers, some teachers who we all can learn some from today. And we're going to be talking about back to school. It's a time that we're all in the midst of now. Some of us are scared about it. But today on Ed Talks for the Soul, we have three phenomenal teachers. All are teachers for the Center for the Education and Equity of African American Students. I'm going to give them a moment to introduce themselves, and then I'll brag about them in a second. So I'm going to hand it over to you all, and y'all can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Janice Baines. I teach second grade at Bradley Elementary here in Richland 1 School District.
Hi, I'm Chris Hass. I teach second and third grade. A wonderful opportunity to loop with my kids for 2 years at the Center for Inquiry in Richland 2 School District.
Hi, my name is Sade Collins. I am the African Studies teacher at Jackson Creek Elementary in Richland School District 2.
Like I said, we're going to be definitely learning from all of y'all today. So I want us to just open up today and tell us how y'all are feeling, how y'all doing. All of y'all are starting school tomorrow, maybe. So it's a big day. What are you doing to prepare? And where is your mind at right now?
I'm afraid to answer this honestly, to be honest. This is my 21st year in teaching. I always tear up the last day of school. By the end of June, I get antsy. I want to get back and see my kids and get started. And this year, I'm just entering kind of with a heavy heart and a heavy mind with lots of concern about what's waiting for me tomorrow. Last year was an incredibly difficult year. We worked in tremendous ways to make a lot of things work. The kids, oh my gosh, they took on so much added responsibility. They did a beautiful job with it. But I don't know that I can take another year of what happened last year. And I'm just very, very hopeful for more authentic opportunities this year to interact with my kids, to hug my kids, to play games with my kids, to read next to my kids. So without really knowing what this year holds, I guess I'm feeling a little cautious.
I'll second that. I have excitement. The African Studies position is a brand new position. I'm looking forward to serving as the African Studies teacher. I'll teach students kindergarten through 5th grades, and I'll see them each class once a week. So that's very exciting. But I'm also concerned. This very similar, I will echo what Chris said. Last year was a very trying year, and we pulled together as a school, as a district, as surrounded by our village of supporters around us, and did the best that we could, and a lot of wonderful things we were able to have happen despite the very challenging circumstances. So coming into this year, feeling very similarly, to be quite honest, to last year, just hoping for the best and hoping that cooler heads prevail when they need to, and that we all think carefully about honoring each person's humanity and approach it from that way. And hopefully that means that we'll come out better on the other side of it. So it's mixed feelings. So excitement, but also, cautiously optimistic about what the year holds.
And I will echo the excitement, but I'm a little worried because I was total virtual from the beginning. So I'm a little concerned about, going into the classroom because, one, I hadn't seen my class in a year. So it was shocking to see the amount of stuff that I had. And it was a little overwhelming because I'm like, I didn't do all of this last year. I was virtual. Everything was literally on the computer. And if they needed materials, I went to them and gave them what they needed. But it was nothing like what I have in this classroom. But so that was overwhelming. I'm finally over that. I kind of cleared out, came back together. But I'm a little nervous mostly about seeing it from 2019 and 2020. I don't want all the changes we've made, all of the progress that we've made as far as teachers being able to be creative, to, you know, I don't want the system to kind of take away that creativity that we have, that authenticity that we have. I don't want the agency we gave our children at that time, or even our families, to, just stop. I want to keep that moment where we knew that the relationships we had to form and develop these strong relationships because we were online. It was a different approach. So I want us to rethink and kind of like think back on what we did and how we did for the pandemic, and then bring that into the classroom. So I'm a little afraid of that. I can say that, but I'm ready to see the children and see what they can do. But I'm also concerned about, what could happen when it comes to our health and all of that as well. So that's where I'm at.
So all of y'all kind of allude to this whole idea of kind of being nervous and cautious, because we're still in the middle of two global pandemics. So we look at the global health crisis that we're in with COVID-19. We also look at the global pandemic that we're in with anti-Blackness, this anti-racist work. And so making sure that we acknowledge the fact that teachers do have a right to kind of feel nervous about this. Even teachers who, like the three of you all, y'all are doing this actively every day in your works, in the school, outside of the school, community-wise, everywhere. So can y'all talk a little bit about how you plan to navigate through both pandemics? Janice, you mentioned a lot about how the pandemic really gave us some eye-opening realities that we needed to tap into some new creativities. So what are some things that these pandemics have taught you that has redesigned your teaching?
Definitely, let's think about, rethink what what would we call it? Family, what a family community looks like. Does it look like someone always coming into school? Of course, it's not going to look the same this year because families can't come. But last year when we were on the computer, we still had a community. Actually, we had to build the community from a cell phone for those who didn't have iPads or any type of technology at the beginning. So you had to make phone calls. You have to build this trust. Like, how are we going to incorporate those things? Like, what does Class Dojo mean to us? Seesaw, really looking at the technology piece, but also remembering Black people especially did this before. School was not always in the school building. It was at the church. It was at the local community center. So can we look at it in that way and making it count?
And Sade and Chris, do y'all have something to add to that?
I would say it also gave one thing that I feel was a positive out of not the pandemic, but having to have some element of virtual, whether it was virtual, hybrid, or as we were transitioning out, we still maybe had a couple of students who were learning virtually as well. but whether we were in what we called phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, that families were able to get more of a glimpse of what went in day to day in the classroom, and were able to be active participants a lot of times. And so sometimes you were engaging in a learning experience with the students. You may have had a sibling to join in or a parent to join in. We were talking about ways that our families make meaning of the world, and things that are special to us. And one of the students included in his presentation that his family loved to do the electric slide. And the other students were like, the electric slide, what dance is that? So his mom was able to teach from her salon, the class, the electric slide. You know, so those opportunities usually would take a little more scheduling if it were in just a traditional setting. You know, we didn't have as many parents being able to join us via video, which I think that will be sort of a mainstay now. But those opportunities to be able to connect with families, as Janice was saying, in different kinds of ways, I feel was one thing that came out of this that we could look at as a positive. Also, being able to find opportunities to connect with families in ways that we may not have thought of before. And so we really did have to draw upon our creativity, collaboration, leaning in and really being open to different ways that families wanted us to engage. And I think all of that we can take out of this once we are actually on the other side of it. And so I think that also just the uses of technology, various levels of technology in our day-to-day classroom engagements. It was really a sink or swim situation. So regardless as to your level, your entry point, whether you were someone who integrated high levels of advanced technology regularly, or someone who entered doing just enough to get those grades and attendance in the power school, we all had to learn and add to our skill set concerning technology, because that was the way that we stayed in contact with each other. That was the way we stayed in contact with families. And so, and then also different technology tools that we learned so that we could use them with our students and within our school communities. So those are things that I think will transform our profession, to be quite honest. Is just, I don't think that piece of it is going away. I think the expectations have been raised. But then also I hope with that, we're also keeping in mind the decision makers and those of us that are working with students every day, that we are teaching human beings. So at the end of the day, no matter how advanced our technology, no matter how many gadgets and tools we have, no matter what we have going on and that's available to us, at the end of the day, we just need to know that our children are well. And so, so sometimes we have to step back from all of that and go down to the very basics, because that's what they need. They need us to connect with them heart to heart, mind to mind. So, so yeah, so it's one of those that we don't want to get too caught up into, you know, all of the gadgetry and the tools. We want to always go back to, who are we teaching? We're teaching humans, and we want to connect with them, you know, on that very human level.
Yeah, and that really makes me think. I think one of the biggest challenges of last year, and one of the greatest things that we lost, at least in my experience in my classroom, was that element of community and connectedness to one another. There's so many things I learned that I had taken for granted because they were so simple, but now I see the power of sitting in a circle and looking each other in the eye, of learning to sit and listen to other people's stories with the intention to understand and to ask questions. When everyone's spread around a room and they're behind barriers and they're staring at screens and some are at home, it was difficult to recreate those sorts of things. And then when I think in terms of the social justice work that we do in the classroom, where it's so dependent on people having open, honest conversations, that's built upon the trust that we've been able to establish as a classroom of very diverse kids and very diverse families. It was a challenge because the community piece was not as strong last year as it normally would have been. And that's the part I'm really looking forward to this year. I'm really hopeful for, because we need to be in the presence of one another again physically to see each other. And I don't say that to mean that I don't think we should remain safe. I absolutely know that we need to remain safe. I'm just longing for that day when we get to return to those practices that restores the sense of community in our classroom so we can start having conversations that feel very, very meaningful. Last year, we made many attempts to do that, and I played with all sorts of technology replacements for the things we did, but honestly, none of them were the same as just being there with one another. But I will say, and kind of building on something that you two noted, I did learn through technology that there are other opportunities for advocacy that I had not been taking advantage of previously, and that's through the use of Zoom or Google Meet. I can get state senators and state reps and lobbyists and school board members and community members in my classroom like that because it's so much easier to schedule them. It's so much easier to make them accessible. So of all the things last year, I felt like I failed at. There were many. I felt like I failed at. Um, we jumped on Representative Brawley's pay equity bill and had her in, and she helped us understand why she refiled that bill, what was in it, why she was doing it. We had opportunities to research it, talk about to people with all sorts of different perspectives about it, and then ultimately take everything we learned to Representative Thigpen, who could just jump in like this and meet with us so the kids could speak their mind and lobby with them. And that would have been harder to accomplish, not impossible, because we've done it other ways as well in the past. But it's so much easier to accomplish through technology. So I think there's definitely some things from last year I'm excited to bring forward. But there's 98% of things I'm excited to return to.
Right, and y'all talk about, Sade, you mentioned this whole concept of going back to the basics, and all of you mentioned community. So when we talk about the basic foundation of our classrooms and building that community, can y'all share some ways that y'all build community in your classrooms that teachers might be able to pick up and adapt for their own classrooms?
One thing that I will say that I try to um, do and really help the students to be able to do is to truly engage in a very active posture, because there are times where and I know I've had these experiences and you all may have as well, where you can be listening but not listening. You're not actually listening. You may be present, you may be, physically understanding that there's sound going in your ears, but to really actively listen to what someone is saying and be able to take something away from it, or add a point, or provide another point of view. And that's something that that I try to do. And we established that very early on in the school year, that that's very important for us to be able to find ways that we can communicate with each other that honors different ideas, that honors the diversity of thought, that honors our different experiences. And then if we set that as the foundation, it really takes us through the rest of the school year. So one of the first things that I try to do throughout, we set the foundation early and then just continue it, is really talk about what are ways that we engage with each other that may be similar to ways that we engage at home, similar to ways that we engage in our communities, but sometimes may be different. And then how can we honor what each person brings? And so that's one of the first things. And we do that in different ways. We have our time where we come together in our community circle very early on. And we talk about things that are important to us. We sometimes use texts to help guide those conversations. We sometimes use music. We use experiences. We have guests that come in to share with us very early on, just that help us to make some of the connections. And so really just trying to have that authentic time of connecting with students and leaning in. That's one thing that I said a couple of years ago. I want to really lean into what my students are doing, their motives behind the things that they're thinking and saying, and ways that they sometimes transform our classrooms if we honor that space. And so, so that's one of the main things that I try to do in the very beginning, is just make sure that we are creating a climate where everyone feels that their voices are honored, and that whether we see ourselves as alike in a lot of ways or dissimilar in other ways, that we know that it's okay, that we're all a part of this class together, and that it may start that particular year, but it continues for many years to come, that we have those relationships that we've established and feel are important. So setting that foundation very early on. And then you see it in everything else. So you're not having to practice procedures as much when you're talking about, ways that we treat each other. And when we say respect, what does that look like in our classroom? And just having that sort of baseline that we set together as a classroom family. So we spend a lot of time doing that. So it's a lot of discussions. It's a lot of negotiating. It's a lot of listening and again, pulling in what does this similar process look like in our homes and our communities? Because at the end of the day, our students, they're negotiating between their homes and communities and the school. And so we do a lot of that in the beginning, and then it continues. It doesn't stop throughout the year.
So you bring up a really good point that I want us to just kind of marinate on just for a moment, though, because this concept of taking that time at the beginning of the school year to get to know our students, build that community, and you use the word negotiate to create our classroom community. And so this idea to allow students to have a voice, we're honoring their humanity, but not only are we honoring our humanity, we're looking at the reality that we're expecting them to operate in the same classroom community, but we have to be able to give them a voice, be able to give them say in how that classroom community is going to interact, how is it going to function, so we know that we can hold them accountable to our expectations within the community. Just as well as we like things and dislike things that students may do, we do things that students don't like sometimes. And we have to give them the space to be able to at least voice that. Some things are non-negotiables. It might come down from the district or something of that nature. But there are some things that we do that we really don't have to do that might annoy the students, that we can honor them by giving them the opportunity to be able to share those things. So I'm really glad that you shared this concept of being able, like there is no reason you should be teaching the first day of school, the second day of school, the first week of school, really. You really had to take that time to get to know your students. I remember when I was a classroom teacher, I remember a particular teacher came to me and she was like, oh yeah, they had been through like the half of the first unit in math, and we were still building community in our classroom. But 2 weeks later, we were almost finished with the unit, and she was having to still deal with behavior issues and things of that nature that we didn't have to deal with as much because we understood what our expectations were in the community.
Well, and I love that you finished all of that. I love that you finished all that with saying, and it's not just the beginning of the year, it carries forward throughout the entire school year. I know for a fact there was a time in my career when I thought that's something you did at the beginning of the year, and I didn't recognize the fact, no, that's something you're always doing. If you're truly teaching in a way where you're honoring your kids' lives and their home cultures and their knowledge and everything they have to bring to the classroom, then we never stop looking for opportunities to invite in their stories, their interests, their concerns, and all those sorts of things. One of my favorite examples, you just mentioned something that people could do in their classrooms. One of my favorite examples comes from a colleague of mine, Tiffany Palmatier, who teaches kindergarten and first grade. And when she starts a new loop, she always invites all of the parents to select a picture book that in some way represents their child. And then she says, if you want to write an accompanying letter with that, I would love to share that with the kids too. And then she features them and she reads a story and the kids have a chance to ask questions. And I love that it focuses on their identities in so many different ways, right? It's not narrowly defined by race or gender or any of these other things. We have all of these opportunities, or she has all these opportunities to explore that we are many things. We are many things all in one. But it's a great opportunity for the kids to really get to know each other and to hear those parents' voice or caregivers' voice come into the classroom. Um, I think little things throughout the year, you're talking about it carries forward. Absolutely does. When we have writing workshops that feature choice for our kids to tell their own stories, right? When we allow kids space to respond to stories with their own connections and their own wonderings and things like that, there's so many opportunities throughout the year where our kids' voices take center stage. And if we're doing it right, we're allowing that to not only supplement the curriculum, but really fuel the curriculum in lots of ways.
I guess I'll piggyback on that. we start our community with Akoma, the Adinkra symbol. And of course, that means love, but also patience, endurance, goodwill, faithfulness, and consistency. And so with that, I introduce our class with seeing each other as a team, because one, no man is an island. Two, we have to be able to work together and work alone at times, but this is throughout the year, and enjoy the moments, because there are going to be some other moments that we're not going to like. We're not going to know. We need to have a handle on how they're thinking and what they're going to do as far as in the classroom to prepare them for adulthood. So I think this conversation is good because it makes me rethink of how I'm going to use that. Especially, I love the idea with the book for the parents, because I often ask the parents to write me a letter about their student. And that's how that's my first activity. Just write me a letter of what you know about your child. And I hang that up. And so this is what your parent says about you. So, and you learn so much through the eyes of a parent. And then you could tell, you can see it. You can see how much that child has been nurtured, how much they've been loved, and you carry that on. And I learned to do that with my substitutes. I would write a letter to the substitute. You have 20 amazing so-and-so. So you're teaching people how to treat your child also. And so it carries on with that. But, again, just going back and creating those relationships, and so they can have the voice, and also being able to stand up for each other when you're away from an adult. That's very important, and standing up for those rights that we talk about and what's wrong, and being silent when you need to stand up. So thinking about all of that and why it's important. That first month, I don't even think about the first 2 weeks. First month, it's like, this is what we're going to do, and sometimes we have to slow it down. And we're excited, but let's come back. Let's think about, let's go to the core. Why are we here? What are we doing? Let's make sure. And of course, being in certain schools where new students come all the time. So you're learning about new people, giving them the world to look at. And so I think the ways we're creating provides that space for the kids in the classrooms.
And as we talk about communities and how our communities might even include, one of the common themes that everyone keeps bringing up is this being inclusive of our families. Like, our kids are not beings by themselves. They bring in so much from their family experiences. Their families have so much funds of knowledge that we really can benefit off. And I think we have learned that, and we have to make sure that we capitalize that. But when we think about other members of our community, Janice, can you share how you incorporate like your student teacher and such?
Well, with the student teachers, I'm so glad now that they get to start on the first day with us. So as far as my student teacher this year, I was able to, work with him and show him the classroom, what we can do first. But as far as tomorrow on the first day, he's their other teacher, not a student teacher. And there's a reason for that, because later on, he'll take control of the class. And if they're considered a student at that moment, there's like a disconnect with the community you're trying to build. We want them to be included, and like we want the children to be included. And so I think that line of putting them as student teacher kind of is a crossfire. And so giving him the ability, or her the ability, to bring in their story. So we're going to do a name story using the CEEAAS tomorrow. And he's going to introduce himself, excuse me. And I told him, don't be afraid. They're children. They want to know you. And so that calmed him down because he was a little nervous. But I showed him what the plans were as far as me introducing myself. And so he kind of used what he learned in class. And he's going to use some of the, strategies that I gave, like I'm introducing Stevie Wonder's These Three Words. And I'm like, so what song do you have that represents love to you?
But you can't bring that up though, Janice. That's unfair that you bring that up. Just because we know so much about how you use that song in your classroom, it is so not fair. And so we have to definitely bring you back on the episode. So just talk about like even that one song, how we can be so much more effective on teaching our children just by reaching them where they are. And I don't mean to cut you off, Janice, but I know that Sade, you continue to mention Adinkra symbols and how you incorporated Dinker symbols. Shameless plug, we have an article out called Back to Africa where we talk about the use of the Dinker symbols in the classroom. But Sade, can you share some about how you use the Dinker symbols in your classroom, just briefly?
Sure, and I will, as you said, briefly share my screen. So one of the things that we do is we talk about different dispositions that we feel are important to operating together within this common space, within our school environment. And so we talk about cooperation, and with each of these words that we discuss, we assign an Adinkra symbol. So these are some of the ways that the students that we co-constructed definitions for these different dispositions, and then Adinkra symbols that we matched. Now, tomorrow's the first day of school. So the set that we create for this year may look totally different. The words will be similar, but the students may choose Adinkra symbols that they feel are a closer fit. So working peacefully with others, so cooperation. Respect, honoring the humanity of others. And we talk about how respect across cultures and across different groups may look different ways at different times. So we bring that into our conversation so that we can have a common way that we're defining respect. Compassion, so having a kindness of heart. And what will that look like as we are interacting with each other and interacting outside of our school space? Empathy, understanding how someone else is feeling and the importance of empathy, just as we interact with others. Honesty, about telling the truth, and how sometimes with honesty, the truth is not always easy to swallow. It's not always easy to accept. Sometimes in telling the truth, we talk about difficult issues or matters that may be kind of difficult to talk about. So what we do is we talk about some of these key dispositions that we feel are important to creating an environment in which all students feel emotionally safe, in which all students feel they can they have an active part in the environment, that they can learn, that they can develop meaningful relationships with myself and their classmates. And so these are some of the ways that we use the Adinkra symbols in order to set the tone for the school year. And we connect it to our school-wide expectations, but we really talk about how we can draw upon our history, the histories of the students in order to bring us forward. How we can draw upon our cultural histories in order to bring us forward in setting the tone and the climate for our classroom community. So these are just some of the ways that we do that. And we, again, refer back to it. We revisit these definitions, we add to it. The students will cite examples, and we like to display those as well. So we often take photographs of different things that we've done, and we will add that, and it just sort of creates a mural that expands throughout the year.
and on about really about starting our community, engaging our community, and how that looks throughout the year. But as we wrap up for today, if we can just have y'all share one thing that you think a teacher should consider as they go back to school. If you could give them just one brief thing, what would it be?
One thing that I'll mention is just remember that for some of our students, they may have had very limited opportunities to interact with their peers over the last year. For some of them, they were virtual all year last year. And so they may not have been in the actual school building in a while. And then it's also they're coming back from summer. So even those that may have returned early on, they really do long to be close to their classmates and to see us as their teachers. And so just really creating space for that beyond just the first couple of weeks of school and making sure that that is a part of just our regular school day is that they need those times to connect without an agenda, that they are setting their agenda. And so making those spaces and just being very consistent about it, because there's a lot going on in the world. And regardless as to the age of the students we teach, they're aware of what's going on. They hear the conversations, they may have been a part of conversations, they see the impact on their own families. So those spaces also give them a time to express their feelings, their concerns, their fears, but also their joys, their triumphs. So just making sure that we not only just think about it as, oh, I got to build this community, but that it really needs to be something that we value and really make the time to show that we value it throughout the entire school year.
I would say that all of us coming back into a new school year should always remember that one of our largest goals should be to create a sort of democratic space, democratic classroom that reflects the sort of world that we want to live in, that the things that we're doing with our kids, alongside our kids, should reflect how we want them to be in a world outside of classrooms. I think this is a time of year where you see far too many teachers rolling out procedures and rolling out consequences and all these sorts of things instead of just inviting their kids into what sort of community do we want to build? What's important to us? What do we want to accomplish? How might we go about doing that? How might we treat each other? I think if we can work harder at developing a culture within our classroom alongside our kids where they're part of that process, a lot of the issues that people do have that are behavioral will largely disappear. Not all of them, of course, but a number of them. And I love the point that you made earlier that maybe sometimes kids do stuff that might be a little frustrating for us sometimes. But there are certainly times when we're doing things, when we're making decisions, we're introducing structures that are very frustrating to them. It should also be our goal that we have a space where our kids are comfortable coming to us in a public circle and saying, hey, I have some concerns about the way this is happening. And I wonder if we could revisit. Teaching kids to have those conversations in respectful and productive ways so that they can grow into the type of adult who can continue doing that work so that they can advocate in ways that are productive instead of counterproductive.
And I would say, remember that you are a teacher, and in teacher, the word heart is in there. So let your heart lead your eyes and your mind.
Wow, did you really have to drop the mic like that? But that really is a great way for us to wrap up and really just to reconsider how we are going to approach the school year. It's tough for all of us, for our students, for our parents. Remember grace, remember love, and remember that we're all in this together. And so we're gonna see you all later, and we'll definitely be bringing all of you back on our podcast. So excited! This is our first episode, but definitely tune in to us, like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.